In the vast expanse of the galaxy where 1,000 civilizations have risen and fallen, there exists a word that makes even the most ancient species pause in recognition. It is not a word of conquest or dominion, though it has shaped empires. It is not a word of technology or science, though it has revolutionized understanding. It is a simple word, spoken in a dead language from a small blue world that once orbited an unremarkable yellow star. The word is mercy. But mercy, as the galaxy learned too late, is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is the most dangerous gift a species can offer, because when mercy is rejected, when it is spat upon and dismissed as the foolishness of the weak, something far more terrifying takes its place. This is the story of how humanity offered mercy to the galaxy exactly once, how that mercy was answered with genocide, and how the survivors made sure that the word mercy would be remembered forever, not as a sign of weakness, but as the last warning before the storm. The Zephyrians thought they were conquering primitives. The Kethvar believed they were harvesting resources. The Voidborn assumed they were eliminating a minor obstacle to their expansion. They were all wrong. They had been given mercy once. They chose to destroy it instead. Now, 300 years later, the galaxy knows the price of that choice. Ships bearing the black and silver of humanity appear without warning. Worlds that have forgotten the meaning of fear remember it in an instant. And across the stars, from the oldest archives to the most primitive oral traditions, the same message echoes. Mercy was given once. Never again. This is that story. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the orbital station Harmony, watching the blue marble of Earth turn slowly beneath her feet. The morning sun painted the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and azure, and she could see the weather system swirling over the Asian continent like brushstrokes on a cosmic canvas. After 43 years of life, 20 of them spent in diplomatic service, she still found the sight of her homeworld breathtaking. Today would be the last time she would ever see it whole. The communication from the Zephyrian hegemony had arrived 3 days ago, transmitted on frequencies that Earth's radio telescopes had detected for the first time just 5 years earlier. The message was simple, translated through the universal mathematical constants that any spacefaring civilization would recognize. Earth was to surrender all resources and submit to incorporation into the hegemony. Resistance would result in planetary sterilization. Earth's response had been equally simple: a request for negotiation, an offer to discuss terms, and a plea for peaceful resolution. Elena had personally crafted the diplomatic language, drawing on every protocol she had learned in her years, representing humanity in the early days of first contact with 3 other civilizations. The message emphasized humanity's desire for peace, their willingness to contribute to galactic civilization, and their hope that wisdom would prevail over violence. The Zephyrian response had been a single word: refused. Now Elena watched as the first hegemony ships materialized out of hyperspace, their sleek silver forms emerging like daggers against the starfield. Her enhanced bionic eyes automatically counted them as they appeared: 50, 100, 200. The orbital defense platforms that represented humanity's most advanced military technology looked like children's toys in comparison. "Ambassador!" came a voice behind her. Elena turned to see Captain Marcus Chen, the station commander, his face grim. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead hegemony vessel." Elena nodded and followed him to the communication center. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a being that was humanoid in basic structure, but clearly alien. The Zephyrian had elongated features, pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and eyes like chips of black ice. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in crisp, emotionless English. "I am Fleet Commander Felnash of the Zephyrian hegemony. You will now observe the consequences of defying our directive." Elena stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over despite the fear that clawed at her chest. "Commander Thelnash, I am Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Federation. I formally request that you reconsider this course of action. We are prepared to negotiate in good faith. There must be a way to resolve this without violence." The alien's expression didn't change. Negotiation was offered, terms were given. You refused to comply. "We asked for discussion, not compliance," Elena said, keeping her voice steady. "Surely a civilization as advanced as yours understands the value of peaceful cooperation over forced subjugation. We offer our friendship, our knowledge, our willingness to contribute to the galactic community as equals." For a moment, something that might have been amusement flickered in those black eyes. "Equals? You believe yourselves equal to us?" "We believe all sapient life has inherent worth and dignity," Elena replied. We believe that diversity of thought, culture, and perspective strengthens any civilization. We ask not for equality of power, but for equality of respect. Commander Thelnash was silent for several heartbeats. When he spoke again, his tone carried what could only be described as contempt. You speak of mercy as if it was strength. You speak of peace as if it mattered. Your species has had 5 years to prepare for this moment since our scouts first detected your transmissions. In that time, you could have built weapons, fortified your worlds, prepared for war. Instead, you built communication arrays and drafted treaties. You are weak, and weakness invites conquest. Elena felt the eyes of the communication center crew upon her, felt the weight of speaking for every human being on the planet below. Commander, mercy is not weakness. Peace is not surrender. They are choices made by those strong enough to build rather than destroy. I ask you one final time. Please allow us to demonstrate that cooperation serves us all better than domination. The alien commander studied her through the view screen for a long moment. Then something changed in his expression. A subtle shift that Elena's diplomatic instincts recognized as decision. For just an instant, she dared to hope. You have courage, human, Thelnash said finally. It is a pity that courage without power is meaningless. Your mercy is noted and rejected. Witness the price of weakness. The screen went dark. Elena turned to Captain Chen, who was already coordinating with the defense platforms. Through the observation windows, she could see the hegemony fleet moving into attack formation. The orbital platforms opened fire first, their particle beams and missile salvos reaching out toward the alien ships like desperate fingers. Some found their targets, causing brief flares of light as shields absorbed the impacts. The return volley was devastating. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from the hegemony ships, each one precisely targeted. Within minutes, every orbital defense platform was either destroyed or disabled. The space elevators that connected the surface to the orbital infrastructure came next, their massive cables severed in cascades of fire that painted the night sky with falling stars visible even in daylight. Evacuation protocol is in effect. Captain Chen announced over the station's communication system. All non-essential personnel to the escape pods. This is not a drill. Elena remained at her post as chaos erupted around her. Through the tactical displays, she watched the invasion unfold with the precision of a surgical procedure. Hegemony troop transports descended towards major population centers, while larger vessels positioned themselves in high orbit. The Earth's military forces engaged where they could, but it was immediately clear that the technological gap was insurmountable. "Ambassador!" Chen said, appearing at her side with an emergency evacuation suit. "You need to leave now. The last transport launches in 5 minutes." Elena shook her head. "My duty is to represent humanity. If this is the end, then I will witness it." From her vantage point on the station, Elena watched as the invasion proceeded with methodical efficiency. The aliens made no attempt to preserve infrastructure or minimize civilian casualties. Cities that housed military installations were simply obliterated from orbit. Civilian areas were occupied by ground forces that herded populations into processing centers with mechanical indifference. The communications array on the station still functioned, and Elena found herself listening to scattered transmissions from the surface. Radio operators in rural areas reporting alien aircraft. Military units calling for reinforcements that would never come. Civilian emergency broadcasts that grew steadily fewer as the hours passed. One transmission caught her attention. A group of children in a school in rural Montana, their teacher trying to maintain calm as alien ships passed overhead. The teacher's voice was steady as she led them in song, an old Earth ballad about hope and resilience. Elena found herself crying as she listened, not just for the children, but for what they represented, the entirety of human culture and potential that was being systematically erased. As the first day of the invasion progressed, Elena began to understand the true scope of the hegemony's plan. This was not conquest in any traditional sense. The aliens were not seeking to rule humanity or exploit their labor. They were conducting what could only be called systematic extermination, executed with the cold efficiency of an industrial process. Reports filtered in through military channels as long as they remained operational. Entire cities evacuated and their populations simply disappeared. Agricultural centers stripped of all biological material. Even the bodies of the dead were collected and processed, though for what purpose Elena could only guess. By the end of the second day, organized resistance had ceased. By the third day, the last military communications went silent. Elena remained on the station, now alone except for Captain Chen and a handful of crew members who had refused evacuation. They monitored what sensors still functioned and watched as the blue world below them was systematically stripped of life. The hegemony was thorough. Oceans were drained of their biological content. Forests were harvested down to the soil. Even bacterial life in the deep crust was apparently extracted, based on the massive mining operations that scarred the continents. What remained was a grey, lifeless sphere, its surface marked only by the geometric patterns of alien industrial activity. On the seventh day, Commander Thelnash appeared on their communications screen once more. His expression was as emotionless as before, but Elena thought she detected a hint of satisfaction. "The harvest is complete," he announced. "Your species has been processed efficiently. Your biological and genetic material will contribute to the strength of the hegemony. Your worlds will serve as resource extraction sites for future expansion." Elena, exhausted and numb with grief, found her voice one final time. "Why?" she asked. "We offered cooperation, we offered friendship. Why was genocide your only answer?" The alien commander considered her question with the air of a teacher explaining a simple concept to a slow student. "Because mercy is a luxury that only the strong can afford, and you were not strong. Because peace is meaningful only between equals, and you were not our equals. Because in this galaxy there are only two types of sapient life. Those who take, and those who are taken from. You chose to be prey. And if we had chosen differently?" Elena asked. "If we had built weapons instead of communication arrays? If we had prepared for war instead of hoping for peace?" For the first time, Thelnash showed something approaching emotion, a cold smile that contained no warmth. "Then we would have harvested you more carefully to preserve the useful genetic material. The outcome would have been the same." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her species' extinction settling on her shoulders. When she opened them again, her voice was steady. "Then you have made a grave error in judgment, Commander." The alien's smile widened. "Have I? You speak boldly for one whose entire species is now extinct." "Not extinct," Elena said quietly. "Scattered. You took our world, but some of us were already among the stars. Colony ships launched years ago, research stations in distant systems, exploration vessels beyond your senses' range. You have not killed humanity, Commander Thelnash. You have only taught us what mercy costs when it is offered to the merciless." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in the commander's black eyes. "Impossible. Our sensors detected no significant off-world population." Elena smiled, and there was something in that smile that made the alien lean back slightly. "Your sensors detected only what we allowed them to detect. Did you truly think that a species capable of interstellar communication would not also be capable of interstellar travel? Did you believe that we would keep all our eggs in one basket while making first contact with an unknown galaxy?" The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Elena alone with the handful of human survivors on the dying station. Through the viewports, Earth hung below them like a grey tombstone, stripped of everything that had once made it home. But Elena's words had not been mere defiance. In the deep void between stars, colony ships that had launched during humanity's early expansion carried hundreds of thousands of survivors toward distant worlds. Research outposts in remote systems had gone dark the moment Earth fell, their personnel vanishing into the cosmic background like seeds on the wind. And in the hidden archives of those scattered outposts, every record of humanity's first contact with the galaxy was being carefully preserved, including the complete record of Ambassador Elena Vasquez's final conversation with Fleet Commander Thelnash of the Zephyrian hegemony. Mercy had been offered once. It had been weighed, measured, and found wanting by those who confused strength with cruelty, who mistook compassion for weakness. The survivors would remember. They would grow strong in the darkness between stars, and when they returned, not if, but when, they would carry with them the knowledge of what happened when mercy was rejected. Elena Vasquez died when the station's life support finally failed on the 10th day after the invasion began. Her last act was to transmit a final message into the void, a message that would reach the scattered fragments of humanity across the galaxy. Remember what they took. Remember what they chose. Remember that we offered them our hand, and they chose to cut it off. When we are strong enough to return, let us be the mercy they refused to accept, delivered with the justice they taught us was necessary. The message would take years to reach its intended recipients. But in the cold mathematics of space and time, Elena knew that years were nothing to a species that had learned to think beyond the span of single lifetimes. Humanity would return, and when they did, the galaxy would learn the true meaning of the mercy that had been offered once and rejected forever. Dr. Sarah Chen floated in the observation bubble of the research station Endeavour, watching the binary star system of Kepler 442 paint the surrounding nebula in shades of amber and crimson. The station had been humanity's most remote outpost, a scientific installation designed to study exotic stellar phenomena 300 light-years from Earth. When the first distress signals had arrived via quantum entanglement communicators, carrying news of the Zephyrian invasion, Sarah had been analyzing the magnetic field interactions between the twin stars. That was 18 months ago. Today, Endeavour had become something far more significant than a research station. It had become the de facto capital of humanity's government in exile. The station's central hub buzzed with activity that would have been impossible to imagine during its peaceful scientific mission. Former researchers worked alongside military officers who had been stationed on distant patrol vessels. Civilian refugees from mining colonies shared workspace with engineers who had been conducting deep space surveys, all of them united by a single terrible fact. They were the last remnants of their species. "Dr. Chan," came a voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Admiral James Morrison, formerly of the Earth Space Navy's Exploration Division, now the senior military officer among the survivors. His weathered face carried the weight of decisions no one should have to make. "The Council is ready for your report." Sarah nodded and followed him through the station's corridors to what had once been the main conference room. The emergency expansions over the past months had tripled the station's habitable area, but the new construction still carried the sterile smell of recycled air and fabricated materials. Nothing like the rich, complex atmosphere of Earth that existed now only in memory. The council consisted of 12 individuals, elected from among the survivors, to make the impossible decisions that would determine humanity's future. They represented the remnants of Earth's colonies, research stations, and exploration fleets. Perhaps 15,000 souls scattered across a dozen installations throughout the galaxy's outer rim. Sarah took her place at the head of the table, accessing the holographic display that materialized above the conference surface. The data she was about to present represented months of careful analysis, intelligence gathering, and strategic planning. It would also determine whether humanity had any hope of survival beyond mere existence. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I have completed the comprehensive assessment you requested. The picture it presents is both more dire and more hopeful than we initially believed." The hologram shifted to display a three-dimensional map of the local galactic region. Red markers indicated known Zephyrian hegemony territory, which stretched across nearly 3,000 star systems in an irregular sphere centered on their homeworld. Yellow markers showed the territories of three other major powers, the HFY Collective, the Voidborn Empire, and the Synthetic Federation. "The Zephyrians are not the most powerful force in this region of the galaxy," Sarah continued. "They are, however, the most expansionist. Our analysis suggests they have been following a consistent pattern of conquest for approximately 800 Earth years. They identify pre-interstellar civilizations, allow them to develop basic space technology, then harvest them before they can pose any potential threat." Admiral Morrison leaned forward. "Harvest. They're not building an empire, they're running a farm." "Precisely. The biological and genetic material they collect is integrated into their own population through advanced biotechnology. Each species they absorb adds to their collective capabilities. Earth wasn't the first world they've sterilized, and it won't be the last." Dr. Patricia Wells, formerly of the Europa colony, raised her hand. "What about the other powers? Surely they oppose this expansion?" Sarah's expression darkened. "That's where the situation becomes more complex. The other major civilizations in this region practice their own forms of expansion, though with different methods.
The HFY Collective uses economic domination and cultural assimilation.
The Voidborn Empire relies on technological superiority to force vassal relationships. The Synthetic Federation simply ignores biological species entirely unless they interfere with their computational projects." The implications settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Commander Elena Zhao, one of the few surviving military strategists, voiced what everyone was thinking. "So we're not dealing with a single enemy. We're dealing with a galaxy where every major power views sapient life as a resource to be exploited."
"Not every power," Sarah said, manipulating the hologram to highlight several smaller regions. "There are approximately 37 minor civilizations that have managed to maintain independence through various means.
Most rely on technological specialization that makes them more valuable as trading partners than as conquest targets. A few have found defensible positions in difficult stellar environments, and 3 have achieved a level of technological parity that makes conquest too costly for the major powers." Admiral Morrison studied the display intently. What would it take for us to reach that level of parity? Sarah had been dreading this question, knowing that the answer would determine the course of humanity's future. Conservative estimates suggest it would require between 200 and 300 years of uninterrupted development, assuming we can acquire certain key technologies and establish a sufficient resource base. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Dr. Wells spoke. 300 years. Most of us won't live to see the end of it. No, Sarah agreed, but our children will. And their children after them. She modified the hologram to show a different set of data. Which brings me to the second part of my report. While we cannot achieve immediate parity with the major powers, we can survive. More than that, we can grow. The display now showed star charts highlighting 17 star systems in the galactic hinterlands. These systems are all located in regions that the major powers consider too remote or resource poor to justify expansion. They contain rocky planets suitable for terraforming, asteroid belts rich in rare elements, and stellar phenomena that could mask our development for decades. Commander Zhao leaned back in her chair. You're talking about building a hidden civilization, staying off the galactic radar while we develop the technology and numbers needed to defend ourselves. I'm talking about ensuring species survival, Sarah corrected. The Zephyrians made a strategic error when they chose genocide over subjugation. They eliminated our homeworld, but they didn't eliminate our knowledge, our technology, or our capacity for growth. We have advantages that they couldn't harvest. Admiral Morrison activated his own display, showing the current distribution of human survivors. 15,000 people across 12 installations. Our gene pool is barely sufficient for long-term viability. Actually, it's more than sufficient, said Dr. Mikey. Maria Santos, the chief biologist among the survivors. We have genetic samples from nearly 6 million Earth individuals in the deep storage banks. Combined with advanced reproductive technologies, we can maintain genetic diversity for thousands of generations. The bottleneck isn't biological, it's psychological and cultural. Sarah nodded. Which brings me to the most critical part of the plan. Survival isn't enough. We need purpose. We need a goal that can sustain our people through centuries of hidden development. We need something that makes the struggle worthwhile. She gestured, and the hologram shifted to display the final component of her analysis. Detailed intelligence profiles of the major galactic powers, their weaknesses, their conflicts, and their strategic vulnerabilities. The Zephyrians taught us something valuable, Sarah said, her voice taking on an edge that surprised even her. They showed us that mercy offered to the merciless is not virtue, it's suicide. They rejected our hand of friendship and chose to make us their prey. In doing so, they created something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Doctor? Wells frowned. What do you mean? They created a species with nothing left to lose and centuries to plan. Sarah's smile was cold. The major powers of this galaxy have grown complacent in their dominance. They fight each other for territory and resources, but they've never faced an enemy that was forged in the crucible of absolute loss. They've never encountered a civilization that spent centuries preparing for the single purpose of teaching them the price of rejected mercy. Admiral Morrison was studying the tactical data with the intensity of a man who had spent his career preparing for conflicts that might never come. You're talking about more than survival. You're talking about revenge. I'm talking about justice, Sarah corrected. The Zephyrians will expand again. They'll find another promising species, another world full of people who might offer friendship instead of resistance. And when that happens, we need to be ready to ensure that mercy is protected from those who would exploit it. The debate that followed lasted 3 days. Representatives of the scattered survivor communities participated via quantum communication, their voices carrying across the vastness of space to contribute to the most important decision in human history. Some argued for a pure survival strategy, finding a distant corner of the galaxy where humanity could rebuild in peace. Others advocated for immediate action, striking at Zephyrian installations while the enemy still believed humanity was extinct. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity would choose the long path. The first phase of what became known as the Renewal Protocol began immediately. The most remote research installations went completely dark, their personnel beginning the careful work of establishing hidden colonies in systems so far from major trade routes that their existence wouldn't be suspected for decades. Advanced 3D printers and molecular assemblers began producing the infrastructure needed for long-term civilization. Hospitals, schools, manufacturing centers, and research facilities. The second phase involved intelligence gathering on a scale unprecedented in human history. Every scrap of information about galactic civilization was collected, analyzed, and stored. Cultural patterns, technological specifications, economic networks, political relationships, all of it catalogued with the patience of a species that had learned to think in centuries rather than years. The third phase was the most ambitious, the Great Library. Deep beneath the surface of the dead moon in the Kepler 442 system, human engineers and AI systems began construction of a vast archive. Every book, film, song, and scientific paper that had been saved from Earth was stored there, along with detailed records of human history, philosophy, and culture. But more than that, it became the repository for humanity's growing knowledge of the galaxy and its inhabitants. Dr. Sarah Chan was 93 years old when the first generation of children born in the hidden colonies reached adulthood. She had lived to see the establishment of 7 concealed worlds, each one carefully developed to remain invisible to galactic surveillance. The children born on those worlds grew up with a purpose that previous generations of humans had never known. They were the instruments of a justice that might not be delivered for centuries, but would be delivered nonetheless. On her deathbed, Sarah received a final report from the intelligence networks that had grown to span dozens of systems. The Zephyrian hegemony had expanded their territory by 12% since the destruction of Earth. 4 more species had been harvested, their world stripped of life with the same mechanical efficiency that had destroyed humanity's birthplace. But there was other news as well. Conflicts between the major powers were intensifying. The HFY Collective was struggling with internal economic pressures. The Voidborn Empire had overextended itself in a failed campaign against synthetic strongholds. And most importantly, there were signs that other minor species were beginning to cooperate in unprecedented ways, sharing information and resources in the face of expanding threats. Sarah's last words, recorded for the archives, would become the founding principle of humanity's hidden civilization. We were given mercy once, and we offered it freely. When they taught us that mercy was weakness, they forged us into something stronger than they could comprehend. We are patient now, we are careful, and we are inevitable. The children born in humanity's secret worlds would grow up knowing that story. They would inherit the knowledge, the purpose, and the absolute certainty that mercy offered and rejected creates a debt that must eventually be paid. The galaxy had taught humanity a lesson about power. Now humanity would teach the galaxy a lesson about patience. Mercy was given once. It would not be offered again. But justice was as patient as the stars themselves. Captain Marcus Thorne stood on the bridge of the stealth ship Nemesis, watching the tactical display as it updated with the latest intelligence from the Zephyrian border systems. 147 years had passed since Earth's fall, and the hidden worlds of humanity had grown from desperate refugee camps into a sophisticated shadow civilization. Marcus himself was 4th-generation colonial-born, his great-grandmother having been among the original survivors who established the colony on Kepler's Rest. The ship around him represented the culmination of nearly a century and a half of focused technological development. The Nemesis was invisible to every known form of detection, capable of slipping through hyperspace without leaving the energy signatures that betrayed conventional vessels. Its hull was constructed from metamaterials that could shift their properties at the molecular level, allowing the ship to masquerade as anything from a cargo hauler to an asteroid. "Captain," said Lieutenant Aria Vasquez, her surname a deliberate homage to the ambassador who had made humanity's last stand. "We're receiving the scheduled transmission from Deep Echo Station." The main view screen shifted to display the face of Admiral Catherine Reeves, the current director of the Shadow Fleet Intelligence Division. Behind her, Marcus could see the advanced holographic displays of humanity's most classified installation, built into the heart of a rogue planet drifting in the void between star systems. "Captain Thorne," Admiral Reeves began, "I trust your mission to the tertiary spiral proceeded smoothly?" "Affirmative, Admiral." "The intelligence package has been delivered to our contacts in the Independent Coalition. They now have complete specifications for Zephyrian bioweapon systems and countermeasures for the last 3 generations of Harvest technology." Admiral Reeves nodded approvingly. "Excellent. The Coalition has proven to be valuable allies, even if they don't know the true identity of their benefactors. Speaking of which, we've identified another species that's about to receive the hegemony's attention." The display shifted to show a star system 47 light-years from the nearest Zephyrian outpost. The third planet was a blue-green world with obvious signs of industrial civilization, the Cathara. Admiral Reeves continued. "Pre-interstellar, but they've just achieved fusion power and basic spaceflight. Right in the hegemony's preferred harvest window." Marcus studied the data that appeared alongside the planetary information. The Cathara appeared to be an aquatic species, their cities built both above and below the surface of vast oceans. Their technology showed an interesting integration of biological and mechanical systems, suggesting a species that had learned to work with their environment rather than dominating it. Estimated time until Zephyrian contact? Marcus asked. 18 months, based on their historical expansion patterns. The hegemony scouts have already been detected in adjacent systems. The harvest fleet will follow within 2 years. Marcus felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and carefully controlled rage that had driven humanity's shadow operations for more than a century. Another species was about to face the same choice that Earth had been given. Submit to processing, or face extermination. And like Earth, they would probably choose to offer mercy first. What are our orders, Admiral? Phase 3 intervention, Reeves replied. The Kithara are about to receive some unexpected technological advancement. Our xenobiology teams have prepared a complete technology package that will integrate seamlessly with their existing biotech. They'll go from pre-interstellar to near-peer status in approximately 6 months. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Phase 3 interventions were humanity's most sophisticated operations, requiring years of preparation and careful cultural analysis. The goal was to provide targeted species with the tools they needed to defend themselves, while ensuring that the assistance couldn't be traced back to human involvement. The usual cover story? Modified for local conditions. The technology will appear to be a logical evolution of their existing research, with key breakthroughs happening simultaneously across multiple Kithara research institutions. They'll believe they achieved the advancement through their own efforts. It was a pattern humanity had perfected over decades of hidden intervention. 17 species had been saved from Zephyrian harvest through carefully orchestrated technological gifts. 12 more had received intelligence packages that allowed them to avoid detection entirely, relocating their civilizations to systems the hegemony considered worthless. The beautiful irony was that the Zephyrians had created the very force that was now systematically disrupting their expansion. By attempting to harvest humanity, they had forged a species dedicated to ensuring that no other civilization would face the same fate. Every successful intervention weakened the hegemony, denied them resources, and forced them to adapt to increasingly effective resistance. There's something else, Admiral Reeves continued, and Marcus noticed the subtle shift in her expression that indicated classified information of the highest order. Intelligence Division has completed the comprehensive analysis of major power vulnerabilities that we began 30 years ago. We're ready to move to Phase 4.
Marcus felt his pulse quicken.
Phase 4 had been theoretical for most of his lifetime, the stage where humanity would transition from passive protection to active destabilization of the galactic powers that preyed on emerging species. All major powers? All of them. The Zephyrians were just the beginning, Captain. Our analysis has revealed that every dominant civilization in this galactic region follows some variation of predatory expansion. The galaxy has become an ecosystem where the strong prey on the weak as a matter of course, where mercy is seen as an invitation to exploitation. The display shifted to show a complex web of political, economic, and military relationships spanning dozens of star systems. Marcus could see the intricate patterns that Intelligence Division had mapped over decades of careful observation. The major powers had created a stable system of mutual predation, each one carving out territory and resources while maintaining just enough balance to prevent total war. The HFY Collective, Admiral Reeves continued, has perfected economic warfare. They identify promising civilizations, flood them with advanced technology through aid programs, then use the resulting economic dependence to strip away autonomy and cultural identity. Slower than the Zephyrian approach, but equally effective in the long term. The display highlighted another region of space. The Voidborn Empire uses technological superiority to create vassal states. They offer protection from other threats in exchange for complete subservience. Their protectorates maintain the illusion of independence while serving as resource extraction sites for their overlords. Marcus found himself thinking of Earth, of Ambassador Vasquez's final attempt to offer friendship to beings who saw mercy as weakness. And the Synthetic Federation? The most alien of the major powers, but no less predatory. They view biological species as inefficient resource consumers. Their expansion involves converting entire systems into computational matrices, with any resident biologicals either eliminated or converted into processing nodes. The scope of it was staggering. An entire galaxy had organized itself around the principle that sapient life was a commodity to be harvested, controlled, or eliminated. The few free species existed only because they had somehow found ways to make themselves too valuable to destroy or too costly to subdue. Phase 4 will change that, Admiral Reeves said. and Marcus heard an edge in her voice that reminded him of the recordings of Ambassador Vasquez's final speech.
We're going to teach this galaxy the difference between strength and cruelty, between power and predation. The details of Phase 4, as they were explained to Marcus over the following hours, represented the most audacious plan in human history.
Rather than simply defending individual species from harvest, humanity would systematically dismantle the foundations of predatory civilization throughout their region of the galaxy. The first target was the economic networks that supported galactic predation. Human infiltrators genetically modified to pass as members of various species had spent decades integrating themselves into the banking and trade systems of the major powers. On a coordinated date still 18 months in the future, they would simultaneously trigger cascading economic failures designed to cripple the financial infrastructure that allowed the powers to maintain their vast territories. The second phase involved the strategic release of advanced technologies to dozens of minor species simultaneously. Not the careful, gradual assistance that had characterized previous interventions, but a coordinated uplift program that would create a new tier of near-peer civilizations in a matter of years. The major powers would suddenly find themselves facing not isolated species ripe for harvest, but a coalition of advanced civilizations with shared interests in maintaining independence. The third phase was the most direct, targeted military strikes against critical infrastructure. Humanity's stealth technology had advanced to the point where their ships could operate undetected in the heart of enemy territory. Strategic facilities throughout major power space would simply cease to exist, their destruction blamed on everything from industrial accidents to terrorist attacks by subjugated species. The goal, Admiral Reeves explained, is not conquest or revenge, though there will be elements of both. The goal is to fundamentally alter the power balance of this galactic region. We're going to create a new paradigm where cooperation is more profitable than predation, where mercy is rewarded rather than exploited. Marcus spent the following weeks reviewing the operational details as the Nemesis made its way toward Kithara space. The planning was meticulous, accounting for thousands of variables across dozens of species and hundreds of star systems. Humanity had learned patience from their hidden centuries, but they had also learned efficiency. The first phase of the Kithara intervention proceeded flawlessly. Human agents, disguised as routine cosmic radiation, had spent months infiltrating the planet's information networks. Research facilities across 3 continents suddenly experienced identical breakthroughs in fusion technology, materials science, and quantum physics. The discoveries built naturally on existing Kithara research, appearing to be the logical result of parallel investigation rather than external intervention. Marcus watched from the Nemesis as the aquatic civilization transformed itself with startling speed. Their natural integration of biological and technological systems allowed them to adapt the new knowledge in ways that human planners had only hoped for. Within 6 months, the Kithara had gone from launching crude chemical rockets to fielding a fleet of biomechanical vessels capable of interstellar travel. When the Zephyrian Harvest Fleet arrived in the Kithara system 18 months later, they found not a helpless pre-interstellar civilization, but a formidable aquatic species with weapons technology that had never been seen before. The hegemony ships were designed to overwhelm primitive defenses, not to fight an enemy that could adapt their weapons in real time using biological components. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the Kithara had captured 17 Zephyrian vessels intact, along with their crews and all their technology. More importantly, they had sent a message to the galactic community that the age of easy harvests was ending. Marcus received Admiral Reeves's final transmission as the Nemesis departed the Kithara system. Her expression carried the satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly, but also something deeper, the fulfillment of a promise made by a dying species over a century before. Excellent work, Captain. The Kithara have exceeded all projections for integration speed and defensive capability. More importantly, intelligence indicates that news of their successful resistance is spreading throughout the minor species networks. The Zephyrians are beginning to encounter organized opposition in systems where they expected easy harvests. Marcus smiled. Any word from the other intervention teams? All Phase 3 operations are proceeding on schedule. The hegemony has lost 4 harvest fleets in the past year alone. Their expansion rate has dropped by 37%, and their high command is beginning to express concerns about the increase in organized resistance. The implications were clear. Humanity's hidden war was entering its final phase. The major powers had built their strength on the assumption that emerging species would remain isolated and vulnerable until it was too late for effective resistance. That assumption was being systematically destroyed, one successful intervention at a time. Admiral, Marcus said, permission to ask about the broader strategic picture? Granted. Are we winning? Admiral Reeves was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of generations. Captain, we lost the war for our homeworld 147 years ago. Everything since then has been preparation for a different kind of war. One where we don't fight for territory or resources, but for the principle that mercy should be met with gratitude, not exploitation. She paused, and Marcus could see her looking at something beyond the camera's range. Perhaps a memorial to the 15 billion humans who had died when the Zephyrians demonstrated the price of offering friendship to the merciless.
We're not winning yet, Captain.
But we're changing the rules of the game. And when Phase 4 begins, this galaxy is going to learn what happens when mercy is offered once, rejected, and then replaced by something far more dangerous. Justice delivered by those who have nothing left to lose and infinite patience to plan. The transmission ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts as the Nemesis slipped back into hyperspace. Through the viewports, he could see the stars. The same stars that had watched Earth die. That had illuminated humanity's desperate flight to the galactic rim. That now witnessed their patient return to the center of galactic civilization. Mercy was given once, it would never be offered again. But justice was patient, thorough, and absolutely inevitable. Fleet Admiral Elena Chen Morrison stood in the command center of the battle station Retribution, watching as the final pieces of humanity's centuries-long plan fell into place. The station itself was a marvel of hidden engineering, built inside a massive asteroid that drifted through the neutral zone between major power territories. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than another piece of cosmic debris. Inside, it housed the most advanced military command facility in the galaxy. 312 years had passed since Earth's fall. Elena was sixth-generation colonial-born, her lineage tracing back to both Admiral Morrison and Dr. Sarah Chen through the careful genetic programs that had maintained human diversity through the hidden centuries. At 53, she was the youngest fleet admiral in human history. Chosen for her position not because of age or experience, but because she possessed the unique combination of strategic brilliance and controlled fury that Phase 4 demanded. The holographic displays surrounding her showed a real-time tactical map of known space, with thousands of markers indicating the positions of human assets, allied forces, and enemy installations. What would have been impossible to imagine during humanity's desperate flight from Earth was now reality. A shadow empire spanning hundreds of systems with resources and capabilities that surpassed any single galactic power. Admiral, came the voice of Captain David Vasquez Thorne, another descendant of the early survivors who carried the names of humanity's martyrs as a badge of honor and remembrance. All Phase 4 strike teams are in position. The synchronized attack can commence on your order.
Elena nodded, but her attention was focused on a particular set of displays showing the current status of the four major galactic powers. The intelligence networks that humanity had spent centuries building had finally provided a complete picture of their enemies' capabilities, weaknesses, and critical vulnerabilities.
What they revealed was both encouraging and terrifying. The Zephyrian hegemony, despite their continued expansion, was showing signs of strain. 43 successful interventions had denied them hundreds of harvested species over the past century. Their military was stretched thin. Their economy was beginning to show inefficiencies, and intelligence indicated growing dissent among their leadership about the sustainability of their expansion model. The HFY Collective was facing even more serious problems. The economic networks they had used to dominate dozens of species were showing cascading failures as human infiltrators systematically introduced market instabilities. Their client states were beginning to default on resource extraction agreements, and several had declared outright independence in the past decade. The Voidborn Empire had overextended itself catastrophically. Their attempt to establish protectorates in the galactic core had triggered a war with previously unknown synthetic intelligences that possessed technology beyond anything the major powers had encountered. The Empire's fleets were engaged in a grinding conflict that was consuming resources at an unsustainable rate. Most intriguingly, the Synthetic Federation had recently made contact with humanity through intermediaries. The artificial intelligences that governed that civilization had apparently concluded that biological species under human protection were more valuable as trading partners than as conversion targets. They had quietly begun offering technological exchanges through hidden channels. Admiral Chen Morrison, came another voice. Elena turned to see Dr. Martha. Patricia Santos-Sao, the current head of the Galactic Intelligence Division. We've received confirmation from all infiltrator networks. Economic disruption protocols are ready for implementation across 17 major banking systems simultaneously. Elena allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The economic warfare component of Phase 4 was perhaps the most elegant aspect of humanity's plan. Over 3 centuries, human agents had worked their way into every major financial institution in the galaxy, often rising to positions of significant authority. When activated, they would trigger coordinated failures that would cripple the major powers' ability to maintain their vast territorial holdings. And the technological uplift program? Elena asked. 67 species are ready for simultaneous advancement. The technology packages have been tailored to each civilization's specific needs and cultural characteristics. Every one of them will achieve near-peer military capability within 18 months of activation. The scope of the operation was staggering. Humanity had identified every minor species in their region of the galaxy that showed potential for rapid advancement, then spent decades preparing customized technological gifts that would catapult them from primitive civilizations to major galactic powers. The major powers had built their dominance on the assumption that they would face enemies one at a time. They had never planned for the simultaneous emergence of dozens of advanced civilizations. "Admiral," Captain Vasquez Thorne said, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Deep Memory." Elena nodded. Deep Memory was humanity's most secure installation, built into the core of a tidally locked planet where the extreme conditions made detection impossible. It housed the complete historical archives of humanity, including the detailed records of Earth's destruction and every atrocity committed by the major powers since then. The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to curator Marcus Santos, one of the few humans who had access to the complete archives. His expression carried the weight of centuries of accumulated injustice. "Fleet Admiral," he began. "The High Council has reviewed the final intelligence reports and approved immediate implementation of Phase 4. The authorization codes have been transmitted to all strike commanders. Additionally, the Council has approved the release of the Memorial Archive." Eleanor felt a chill at those words. The Memorial Archive contained detailed records of every species that had been destroyed, enslaved, or subjugated by the major powers over the past millennium. Its release would serve not just as justification for humanity's actions, but as a rallying cry for every free species in the galaxy. "Understood, Curator. Has the timeline been finalized?" 72 hours from this transmission. All networks will activate simultaneously across a front spanning 4,000 light-years. The galaxy will understand what it means to reject mercy offered in good faith. Elena looked around the command center at the faces of her staff. These were the descendants of refugees who had fled into the darkness 3 centuries ago, carrying nothing but their grief and their determination that what happened to Earth would never happen to another world. Now they commanded fleets that could challenge any power in the galaxy, technologies that had surpassed their former oppressors, and a network of allies that spanned dozens of civilizations. "All stations," Elena announced, her voice carrying across the communication networks to hundreds of hidden bases throughout the galaxy. "This is Fleet Admiral Chen Morrison. Phase 4 is authorized. Commence Operation Memorial. Let the galaxy remember the price of mercy refused." What followed was the most coordinated military action in galactic history. Across thousands of light-years, human strike teams began simultaneous attacks on critical infrastructure targets. Zephyrian harvest stations simply vanished, their crews finding themselves aboard human vessels where they were treated with precisely the mercy they had refused to grant their victims. Cathvar economic centers suffered cascading system failures as decades of patient infiltration bore fruit. Void-born command posts discovered that their quantum communication networks had been compromised for generations. The technological uplift proceeded with equal precision. Species that had been struggling with basic interstellar flight suddenly found themselves possessing weapons that could challenge major power fleets. Civilizations that had been hiding from galactic attention discovered that they were no longer alone, that a vast network of allies stood ready to defend them against any aggressor. Elena watched the tactical displays as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The first phase of attacks had achieved 97% success rate. Critical installations were being captured intact, their personnel detained for eventual judgment rather than summary execution. The technology transfers were proceeding exactly as planned, with new allies coming online at a rate that was overwhelming major power intelligence services. "Admiral," reported Captain Vasquez Thorne, "we're receiving communications from Zephyrian High Command. They're requesting negotiations." Elena smiled coldly. "Patch them through." The figure that appeared on the main screen was unmistakably Zephyrian, but Eleanor could see the signs of genetic modification that marked this individual as a high-ranking member of their society. The alien's expression showed what Elena recognized as carefully controlled panic. "I am Supreme Commander Veth Cole of the Zephyrian Hegemony," the being began. "We demand to know the identity of the attackers who have violated our sovereign territory." "Violated?" Elena stepped forward, her voice carrying across the transmission. "Supreme Commander, I am Fleet Admiral Elena Chen Morrison of the Human Defense Coalition. We are not attackers. We are teachers." The alien's confusion was evident. Human? Impossible. The human species was processed over 3 centuries ago. Our records clearly show. "Your records show that you offered mercy once to my species," Elena interrupted. "They show that we attempted to negotiate, to find peaceful coexistence, to build a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. They show that you rejected those offers and chose genocide instead." Understanding began to dawn in the Zephyrian's eyes. "Impossible. Our sensors detected no significant off-world population. Your sensors detected what we allowed them to detect. Did you truly believe that a species capable of achieving interstellar technology would be foolish enough to place all their population on a single world?" Elena's smile was razor-sharp. "Commander Thelnash made that assumption 3 centuries ago. It cost him his life, and it cost your species their future." The alien commander was silent for several moments, clearly struggling to process the implications. When he spoke again, his voice carried a new note of caution. "What do you want?" "Want?" Elena laughed, a sound that contained no humor whatsoever. "Supreme Commander, this is not a negotiation. This is education. For 3 centuries, my people have studied your civilization, your methods, your weaknesses. We have learned patience from you. We have learned efficiency from you. Most importantly, we have learned that mercy offered to the merciless is not virtue. It is suicide." She gestured, and the tactical display behind her shifted to show the real-time status of Zephyrian forces throughout the galaxy. Nearly 40% of their military infrastructure was now under human control. You taught us that strength was the only language the galaxy understood. You showed us that peaceful overtures were seen as weakness to be exploited. Very well. We have become fluent in the language of strength. Now we will teach you the grammar of justice. The Zephyrian commander leaned forward. "You cannot hope to defeat all the major powers. Even if you destroy us, the others will unite against you." Elena's expression didn't change. "Supreme Commander, you still don't understand. We are not just fighting you. We are fighting all of you. Right now, as we speak, the HFY Collective is discovering that their economic networks have been completely compromised. The Void-born Empire is learning that their quantum communication systems have been feeding us intelligence for decades. The Synthetic Federation has already negotiated a non-aggression pact with us." The alien skin paled to an almost white shade. "Impossible. Such coordination would require 3 centuries of patient planning," Elena finished. 3 centuries of building alliances, infiltrating networks, and preparing for this moment. You taught us that mercy was weakness. Now we will teach you that patience is strength." She stepped closer to the communication pickup, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "But do not mistake this for simple revenge, Supreme Commander. Revenge would be swift and brutal. This is justice, and justice demands that you live to see the consequences of your choices." The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with her staff and the tactical displays that showed humanity's shadow empire emerging into the light. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for millennia were discovering that they were no longer alone. The age of predatory expansion was ending, replaced by something that the major powers had never expected to encounter: a coordinated alliance of civilizations, united by the principle that mercy should be rewarded, not exploited. "Admiral," reported Dr. Santos Zhao, "we're receiving communications from 47 minor species requesting alliance status. The Memorial Archive has been transmitted to every major news network in the galaxy. Public opinion is shifting dramatically against the major powers." Elena nodded. Phase 4 was proceeding exactly as planned, but she knew that the real test was yet to come. The major powers would eventually overcome their initial shock and coordinate a response. They still possessed vast resources and military capabilities. The next phase of the conflict would determine whether humanity's shadow war would result in true galactic liberation or merely a temporary disruption of the existing order. But as she looked at the tactical displays showing human fleets emerging from the darkness where they had hidden for 3 centuries, Elena felt the certainty that had sustained her people through their long exile. They had been offered mercy once, and it had been refused. They had spent centuries learning the true meaning of strength, patience, and justice. The galaxy was about to learn that mercy refused was not mercy lost, it was mercy transformed into something far more dangerous. The absolute determination that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. The reckoning had begun, and humanity intended to see it through to its inevitable conclusion. Admiral Elena Chen Morrison stood in the observation deck of the Covenant, humanity's flagship and the first vessel to openly bear human insignia in over 3 centuries. Before her stretched the sight that would have been impossible to imagine during the dark days of Earth's fall. A vast fleet representing 67 different species, united under the banner of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. 5 years had passed since the beginning of Phase 4, and the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The great predatory powers that had dominated this region of space for millennia had been systematically dismantled, their territories redistributed among the species they had once oppressed. The age of mercy refused had given way to an era where cooperation was not just encouraged but enforced. Elena's reflection in the observation port showed a woman bearing the accumulated weight of her species' long struggle. At 58, she had seen the completion of humanity's greatest work, the transformation of galactic civilization from a predatory ecosystem into something resembling justice. But the cost had been measured not just in ships and soldiers, but in the fundamental alteration of human nature itself. Admiral, came the voice of Captain Sarah Thorne Santos, representing the 8th generation of Hidden Colony survivors. The final War Crimes Tribunal is ready to convene. Supreme Commander Vethkol has been brought aboard. Elena nodded, turning away from the viewport to face the culmination of 3 centuries of patient justice. The War Crimes Tribunals had been proceeding for 2 years, systematically addressing the atrocities committed by the major powers across their millennia of expansion. Unlike the quick vengeance that earlier human generations might have sought, these proceedings were methodical, thorough, and absolutely impartial. The main tribunal chamber had been constructed specifically for this purpose, with seating for representatives of every species that had suffered under major power oppression. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy, serving not just as justice but as education, the civilizations learning to build a new paradigm of interstellar relations. Eleanor took her place at the head of the tribunal, flanked by representatives of the primary allied species. To her left sat Ambassador Kaitharainel, representing the aquatic civilization that had been among the first to benefit from human intervention. To her right was Collective Speaker Morven of the Terran Synthesist, the hybrid organic synthetic civilization that had emerged from humanity's alliance with the former Federation. Supreme Commander Vethkol was escorted into the chamber by guards representing a dozen different species. The Zephyrian commander who had once embodied his civilization's arrogant certainty now appeared diminished, his pale blue skin bearing the pallor of someone who had spent months confronting the true scope of his people's crimes. Supreme Commander Vethkol, Elena began, her voice carrying across the chamber and to billions of viewers throughout the galaxy. You stand before this tribunal representing not just your own actions, but the systematic policies of the Zephyrian hegemony over the past 800 years. Do you understand the charges against you? The alien commander raised his head, and Elena could see that something had changed in his demeanor during the months of proceedings. The arrogant certainty that had once defined Zephyrian leadership had been replaced by something approaching comprehension. I understand the charges, Admiral Chen Morrison. I have spent these months reviewing the evidence presented by your people. I have seen the records of civilizations my people destroyed, species we processed, cultures we erased. His voice carried a weight that Elena recognized, the burden of understanding the true scope of atrocity. I understand now what my people became. Elena studied the alien commander for a moment before responding. Tell me, Supreme Commander, what is the difference between strength and cruelty? Vethkol was silent for nearly a minute, clearly struggling with concepts that Zephyrian culture had never encouraged him to consider. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I believed they were the same thing. We were taught that the ability to take what we wanted was proof of our superiority, that mercy was a luxury only the weak could afford. And now? Now I see that we became the very thing we claimed to despise. We became weak, dependent on the suffering of others for our strength. We became parasites, feeding on civilizations that might have surpassed us if given the opportunity to grow. Ambassador Kitharanal leaned forward, her aquatic features conveying the deep emotional currents that characterized her species' communication. Supreme Commander, my people were among those your hegemony marked for harvest. We offered you the same mercy that humanity once offered. Why was it refused? Vethikol's response came without hesitation. Because we feared that accepting your mercy would require us to see you as equals. And if you were equals, then everything we had done to species like yours would become inexcusable rather than inevitable. Ella nodded slowly. This was the heart of the matter, the psychological foundation that had allowed galactic civilization to organize itself around predation rather than cooperation. The major powers had created cultures that could only validate themselves through the subjugation of others. Supreme Commander, Elena said, 3 centuries ago, my people offered your fleet commander the same mercy that you refused to grant others. We asked for negotiation, for peaceful coexistence, for the opportunity to contribute to galactic civilization as equals. How did your people respond? We destroyed your world and processed your species. The words came out like a physical pain. We chose genocide because we could not imagine strength that didn't come from domination. Elena stood, moving to the center of the tribunal chamber, where a holographic display showed the current state of galactic civilization. Hundreds of species now operated as equals in a vast network of cooperation and mutual defense. Trade flowed freely between civilizations that had been enemies for millennia. Scientific research was shared openly, advancing all participants rather than providing advantages to a few. Supreme Commander, this tribunal was not convened to provide vengeance for the crimes your people committed. Vengeance would have been swift and absolute. This tribunal exists to ensure that the galaxy understands the choice it faces, cooperation or extinction. She gestured to the display, which shifted to show the technological advances that had emerged from galactic cooperation in just 5 years. Medical breakthroughs that had eliminated diseases across dozens of species, energy technologies that had made resource wars obsolete, agricultural advances that had ended hunger on worlds that had struggled for millennia. The mercy that humanity offered 3 centuries ago was not weakness, Supreme Commander. It was an invitation to join something greater than conquest. Your people refused that invitation and chose to make us your prey. In doing so, you taught us that mercy without strength is meaningless. But you also taught us that strength without mercy creates nothing but enemies. Alana returned to her position at the head of the tribunal. This tribunal finds you guilty of crimes against sapient life, systematic genocide, and the institutional oppression of emerging civilizations. However, this tribunal also recognizes that you were shaped by a culture that made such crimes seem not just acceptable, but necessary for survival. She paused, looking directly into the alien commander's eyes. Supreme Commander Vethkol, you are hereby sentenced to life in service to the civilizations your people harmed. You will spend the remainder of your existence working to repair the damage your hegemony caused, to help rebuild the cultures you destroyed, and to ensure that future generations understand the price of mercy refused. The sentence sent ripples through the assembled representatives. Not execution, not imprisonment, but a lifetime dedicated to understanding and repairing the damage caused by predatory expansion. It was justice, of a kind that the galaxy had never seen. Punishment designed not to destroy, but to transform. But Elena wasn't finished. Furthermore, this tribunal hereby establishes the Covenant of Worlds, a permanent alliance dedicated to ensuring that no species will ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. Any civilization that attempts to return to the old ways of predatory expansion will find themselves facing the combined might of every free species in the galaxy. The chamber erupted in acknowledgement from dozens of different species, each expressing approval in their own cultural manner. Elena waited for the response to subside before delivering her final statement. Let it be recorded that mercy was given once, refused, and replaced by justice. But let it also be recorded that when justice was complete, mercy was offered again, not as weakness but as the foundation of a new galactic civilization built on the principle that strength exists to protect the vulnerable, not to exploit them. As the tribunal concluded and representatives began to disperse, Elena found herself approached by Dr. Marcus Santos Wells, the current keeper of human memory. His expression carried the weight of someone who had spent his life maintaining the records of humanity's long struggle. Admiral, he said quietly, the memorial archive has been updated with the final tribunal recordings. Future generations will have a complete record of how galactic civilization was transformed. Elena nodded. And the colonization fleets? Departing on schedule. 18 former hegemony worlds have been selected for terraforming and resettlement by refugee species. The Cathara have volunteered to assist with oceanic world adaptation. The Terran synthesis is providing advanced ecological restoration technology. It was perhaps the most fitting conclusion to humanity's long war. The worlds that had once served as bases for predatory expansion were being transformed into homes for the species that had been displaced by that expansion. Former victims were becoming the architects of galactic restoration. Elena walked to the observation deck one final time, looking out at the fleet that represented the new galactic order. Ships of 100 different designs flew in formation, their crews working together despite having been enemies for millennia. It was beautiful in a way that transcended simple aesthetics. It was the physical manifestation of justice achieved through patience and mercy earned through strength. But as she watched the fleet, Elena was conscious of a profound change that had occurred within humanity itself. The species that had once offered mercy unconditionally had been forged into something harder, more pragmatic. They had learned to extend mercy only when backed by the power to enforce it, to offer cooperation only when prepared to defend it absolutely. The galaxy had taught humanity that mercy without strength was suicide. Humanity had taught the galaxy that strength without mercy was also suicide. Just slower and more elaborate. Captain Thorne Santos joined her at the observation port. Admiral, the Council has approved the final phase of reconstruction. The new galactic government will be established with rotating leadership among member species. Humanity has been offered the first term. Elena shook her head. Declined. We'll serve as guarantors of the system, but we won't lead it. Leadership requires trust, and the galaxy needs time to learn that our strength exists to protect, not to dominate. The younger officer studied Elena's profile against the starfield. Do you think we've truly changed things, or have we simply replaced one form of predation with another? Elena considered the question that had haunted her throughout the transformation campaign. We've taught the galaxy that predatory expansion is no longer profitable. We've shown that cooperation provides better outcomes than conquest. Whether that lesson persists depends on whether future generations remember the price of forgetting it. She turned away from the viewport, her expression carrying the weight of 3 centuries of human struggle. The mercy we offered once was refused, and it created us as we are now. The mercy we offer going forward is backed by the absolute certainty that refusal will have consequences that no civilization can survive. As the Covenant prepared to depart for the new galactic capital, Elena took one final look at the fleet that surrounded them. These ships represented not just military might, but the promise that mercy would be protected, that cooperation would be enforced, and that the galaxy's predatory age was permanently ended. Somewhere in the depths of space, new civilizations were taking their first steps toward the stars, safe in the knowledge that their offers of peace would be met with friendship rather than exploitation. They would never know the names of the humans who had died 3 centuries ago to make their safety possible, but they would inherit a galaxy where mercy was rewarded rather than punished. Elena Chen Morrison, last Admiral of Humanity's Shadow War, closed her eyes and felt the satisfaction of justice completed. Mercy had been given once, refused, and transformed into something stronger than revenge. The determination that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. The galaxy had learned. The lesson would endure. And in the vast archives of human memory, the names of those who had died on Earth were recorded not as victims, but as the foundation upon which galactic civilization had been rebuilt. Mercy was given once. Justice was delivered as promised. Now mercy could be offered again, backed by the strength to ensure it would never again be mistaken for weakness. The galaxy was finally free to choose cooperation over conquest, and humanity would ensure that choice remained available for all the generations yet to come.